Okay. Hello and welcome to hell.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Or the Wonkette live chat. I'm dressed appropriately as Satan. No.
Actually, a great Maryland piece as well. So thank you.
I'm really more of a Jane Russell. I think we can all agree on that. But with the man voice and all.
Jane Russell's political views, I think she's more in line with you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I was thinking for saying like Rosalind Russell had terrible political views, which is very personally devastating for me.
I think
sorry,
all of us did. But we are distracting from the main. This is not one of our.
I know everything's falling apart, and I'm just like, can I please just talk about fashion history and old Hollywood? And that's just all I want to do because everything's bad.
Someone has suggested that you and I do a separate one on my channel that is just you and me doing the non-political, but actually talking about media and stuff like that, because that they find very fun and the politics very depressing. But we're here for depressing politics, and we have.
Before we get depressing, can everyone look at my nails? They're really cute.
Ooh, those are really cute.
They're strawberries.
Nice.
And summery. So yes, serious things.
My abortion shirt today has a bee and a flower on it.
Yay! I also have flowers. I think it's something is happening. I don't know.
So yeah, hi everyone. Everything's fine.
Yes. So
nothing's falling apart.
Yes. Thank you, Jamie, for joining us. Jamie Lynn Crofts, who our former ACLU lawyer, Wonkette law explainer. She's been with us for these I think going back to the leak. So I think that's interesting. The draft leak. I tweeted earlier today that it was like getting that leak was sort of like the end of that Star Wars film Rogue One, where Vader's killing everyone, but they finally pass it off. A lot of sacrifice happened to get those Death Star plans, and then we actually didn't get Star Wars. We just sort of got like, oh, I guess they're building a Death Star. That's a bummer. And then they built a Death Star. So Jamie, can you your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I'm here reporting from Wisconsin, where I currently am not a full citizen, which is great. Thanks to our lovely Supreme Court decision on Friday, which was 6-3 and not 5-4. So let's just all give a big fuck you to John Roberts right now. Mm-hmm. Because even though like him dissenting wouldn't have changed the outcome, it would have been fucking important. And you know what? Go fuck yourself.
Sorry, didn't he? Was he 5? I've seen different things. So he was 6-3 on like the actual case at hand, and then 5-4 on. So he
overturning Roe. Yeah,
overturning Roe in general,
which really didn't totally count. Like he was just like, "Hey, I'd rather we didn't overturn Roe, but what else?"
Yeah, he basically like wrote a concurrence that was like, I think that what we should really do is what we've been doing, which is keep just incrementally infringing upon women's rights rather than, just this one big jump forward. I mean, it's not because he gives a single fuck about anything. This is the man who wrote Shelby County versus Holder as well.
Which made it possible. You don't get here, and we'll discuss that later, but what we're seeing, and maybe we should, because I think you've seen this a lot, and so we can talk about some of the strategy and reaction. We always have to preface this by saying, obviously, we support people voting for Democrats, and we don't like Republicans, and we don't like Trump, but it's like often you need to address the issue at hand. Like we have an administration that is supposed to, it's hard to clarify the gut punch of this, right? For the average voter. So a lot of us were very in politics, in line. I've seen, frankly, the excuses, but just for the average person, during the Trump administration, there was that sense of the evil empire is here. You've got Stephen Miller at the White House. You've got Jeff Sessions, Attorney General. There's Muslim bans. There's this, you can't, you literally don't have the votes because the Democrats don't control the Senate to stop Betsy DeVos, to stop all of this. Mm-hmm. And that was what those first 2 years were. And so it is, you have to acknowledge that it is significantly different when Democrats are in the White House in controlling it, no matter how narrow the margins, they are controlling Congress right now. And there's these constant over, voter suppression laws, anti-gay bills, and then finally this huge, and to preside over that is fundamentally bad. And when the federal government does not appear to have a response other than Hamilton sing-alongs and to beg for, desperate people in these states that are not fully human for more money without necessarily a go, like what happens with that money is like, I don't know how well that goes over. And what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, we are like, what happened Friday, is a travesty, and it's infuriating, and it's everything that we all knew it was going to be. And like, all of us knew that this was coming as soon as the fucking Supreme Court granted cert. And yet the Democrats in power are pretending that it was like this shocking thing out of nowhere when we first got the leak. And then we had the leak, and we had this, period of time to try to do something. No one did fucking anything. And it's just like, and I'm so sick of hearing like, oh, but Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema is if like that's the reason that no one should do anything to protect reproductive rights right now. Like, the Biden administration could have been issuing executive order after executive order. If the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court's going to strike it down, it's going to strike them down. But like, I don't give a fuck.
Put them out there, at least scare these people a little bit. The thing that's amazing is they are not scared at all. They're acting just like they did when like Trump was in office, where they're like, we can do any damn thing we want. And it's true, because they can.
Yeah. I've alluded to,
they're worse now, I would argue,
something or whatever. And I've alluded to, like, there's an Eddie Murphy routine where he's talking about how he's been making a lot of fun of Michael Jackson, right? And his manager says, Michael Jackson's looking for you. He's real mad. And he's like, so? Like, he doesn't care. Like, I'm not afraid of Michael Jackson. So there's often that sense of, when I was seeing these things of like, wait a minute, maybe Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh lied when they said they were going to, and I would respond.
They all lied. Who knew?
Eddie Murphy going, so? Like, what are you going to do? Yeah. It's just the sense of, this isn't.
I just hate the idea that they pretended I hate that Manchin and Susan Collins pretended they didn't know. They knew they were lying, just like I know they're lying about knowing they're lying. Like, that's. You can tell when people are full of shit. It's very obvious.
Right, like, and they're not as dumb as my U.S. Senator Ron Johnson, who like probably truly doesn't understand what he's voting for some of the time. But no, it's just all infuriating. And like, I'm sorry, when you are the party in power and your response to the rights of tens of millions of Americans, hundreds of millions being taken away, is just keep voting for us. We did nothing to protect you. Like, I'm sorry. No, I don't want to hear vote for Democrats. I want to hear, what are Democrats doing right fucking now to help people? Is it donating a shit ton of money to abortion funds? Wait, even if it's not a legal thing, what are you fucking doing right now to help people today?
Yeah. And I feel like the people there have been some people that have been doing that. I do feel like Warren has definitely been like, hey, here are things we can do. Let's do these things. How about that? Actually, I got to say this. I am watching I'm going through a phase where I'm watching a lot of shows that were very popular during a time when I didn't really have television much. And so I am watching now Boston Legal. And there's this one scene in it the other day, and I completely lost it and started crying because it was right after the Roe thing, where they were talking about some sort of senator type person, and William Shatner or whatever was like, oh, someone said something like, oh, so he doesn't support that the assault weapons ban, but he just let it pass anyway. So he's a Democrat. Like, so it's like, he doesn't support this thing, but he let it expire anyway. So he's a Democrat. And I was like, yeah. So that's like, that's a very that's 20 years ago to have that reputation still, and it's depressing.
There's that sense of how voters should respond. Voters should be Vulcans and logical, and it's just concerning. And we get this a lot, and I've seen my friend Oliver Willis attacked, and Eli Mistel. I've gotten attacked by this, and it's an interesting idea of like, how dare you criticize Democratic leadership or what's happening? And I tweeted this earlier. It's like, these are very much the same people who probably really didn't like Malcolm X in the civil rights movement, because he was very critical of, he wasn't
white liberals.
Yes, of white liberal, but Martin Luther King himself, he called the March on Washington the farce on Washington. He was very vocal. And the idea that suddenly everything, if you criticize anything, that you are part of the other system, is just unrealistic, like, especially when you're losing.
It's also just unfair. It's unfair. It puts people in a position where it's like, it makes people feel helpless. And I don't think that that's a good position to put people in. I do think that people need to go like, hey, this really fucking sucks. We're pissed off at our leaders for not doing anything. And if people say like, no, you can't say that, because the others will find out that, and then piss off themselves. It makes people start like boiling with rage.
Oh yeah. Well, Oliver Willis has the term blue MAGA, and I've used it as well. And it's sort of the idea of that our leaders can do no wrong. And it is very cult-like. Anyone who criticizes the leaders of the cult are cast out of the cult, are considered worse than the actual enemies of the cult. And also there is that obsession in blue MAGA, because the real MAGA is Make America Great Again. This idea of what America is here is like generally believing. So when singing God Bless America does underscore that, the idea that America is wonderful. No matter what, America is wonderful. Our institutions will hold. Everything will hold. Even the rhetoric coming out of the January 6th Commission, which to me is somewhat damning of the fact that Trump was plotting a coup in broad daylight while Democrats were not doing, like, instead of impeaching a guy who says, yeah, I'm president forever, I'm not gonna leave. The rhetoric there is that our guardrails held. Oh, those nice black ladies that Trump tormented and almost got killed, they represent the best of America. And so, using that as a kind of our suffering, and the suffering that people now are getting for this is all part of the American story and American history, is just, and it's hard to break through that, because right now you need folks who are like, no, America is kind of broken in certain ways. So what Eli Mistel had controversially said, the Constitution is kind of trash, was sort of, people had to kind of slap down on that because the idea is that we live in this wonderful democracy and you can't challenge that. And the disconnect of the fact that the average voter wants to see strength and wants to see support. And we live in a world where people do turn to Trump and to DeSantis because they exude strength. And the country club mentality is like, oh, well, Trump's done because he insulted American hero, John McCain. Like, no, he doesn't like McCain, and he's not going to pretend that I'm like the way as well. The guy voted against my block, screw him. And we're not getting that, because the idea is like, no, you're supposed to be so strong and kind and generous.
Well, because I think this, like, here's where I do have empathy, and it's that people are like, well, if we don't have these institutions that we can rely on no matter what, then what do we have? But like, there's a very small percentage of people, not very small, but like only a certain percent of people have been able to rely on our institutions to be what it is they think it is. Like, it's not, our institutions have screwed a lot of people over. Like, it's not necessarily good.
Right. No. And I mean, just like the language, and it's, the same language that was in the draft, so it's not new, but, the shit, and again, this is nothing new coming from the conservatives on the court or in the judiciary generally either. The idea that if something is not explicitly mentioned by name in the Constitution, then the Constitution only protects it if our deep-seated traditions from the fucking 16th, 17th, and 18th fucking centuries, fucking protected it. And no, women and people who weren't property-owning fucking fucking white Christian men didn't have fucking rights either. And that is exactly what they want. They pretend that they don't. They can steep it in whatever legalese language they want. That is exactly what they want to do. That's why they use that language. They want to go back to the time where they're the only ones who have rights and power.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, otherwise they don't feel good about themselves.
Well, it's a white Christian dominance, and we focus on the fact that it's ruled by minority, but not really, because it's white generated. Like Trump got 60% of the white vote. Even during wave elections for Democrats, we usually either barely lose the white vote or still overwhelmingly lose the white vote. And so there's still a perception of Black, especially Black and Latino, like our voter participation is inherently fraudulent. What's legitimate is the white vote and the white control, and obviously the Christian federalism is what we're seeing with
the thing is, they're very, very clear about the fact that they're the only people who count. They're the only real American citizens. You can hear the way that they talk about it. Anything is like, no, we're the Americans, and then you're somehow invading our land and with drag queens, like they're
drag queens would be confused with transgender women all the time.
Yeah, they don't. I don't.
That's deliberate. But
honestly, I will tell you, I think they're going after drag queens because drag is really one of the things that I personally believe led to a lot of LGBTQ acceptance, because drag queens are super fun and everyone likes them. Mm-hmm. I would actually attribute the lack of homophobia in my age bracket in my hometown to the fact that everyone went, like in junior and senior year, everyone went to the drag club. Mm-hmm. It was the 90s. Teenagers went to clubs. It was fine. I was basically Parker Posey at one point. Yeah. But that was people were just like, oh my God, that's where we want to go. We want to go to the drag club. That's what's super cool right now. And then people just sort of were like, oh, this is normal and fine. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to take away the things that make people go, oh, this is normal and fine. Mm-hmm. And, make them terrifying and scary. And so they're all like, no, drag queens, whatever shall we do? They're coming for our children. They're going to sing Cher to them.
And from a political standpoint, Robyn, they really have I had warned when we started seeing the shift of suburban college-educated white voters to the Democratic Party, the Republicans would see no longer any further use in trying to entertain, those voters. So, you're conservative you're a college-educated white Republican, sort of you're just in it for the tax cuts, but you don't really want all the white evangelicalism. You're kind of embarrassed by the racism because you went to college with at least one Black person or something like that. And so we are presenting this image to the public. And now it's like, well, no, we can go straight after these guys because we're all mostly predominantly a non-college educated white party, even getting non-college educated Latinos who also might have similar cultural rejections of those things. And so that is allowing our evil plan. The one thing I would like to get into with you guys, because the voting issue is interesting because, and forgive me if I'm going to take a step back here. So one thing I think is very important to focus on the fact that it's not just that Clinton lost in 2016. And I think people want to focus on that as the one, the exit ramp, the terrible thing that happened that Susan Sarandon inflicted on America. But you get these justices because, honorable man Mitch McConnell blocked Garland, and then he nuked the filibuster. And with moderates like Jeff Flake, Murkowski, Collins, all voting in unison, despite all the hand waving, all the come on, pretty please, cinema, they're overturning these actual rights, these so-called good Republican moderates, when Democrats were filibustering a seat that was already stolen from the last president. And Trump was like, yeah, no, even though this is a stolen seat, we're going to give you this young far right Federal Society clone, no compromise at all, as Obama tried to do. And then it's like, well, F you.
People forget Merrick Garland was a very big compromise.
Yeah.
At the time, people like me, and I assume Jamie also, were like, oh no, this man is not for abortion rights at all. So
and so that was still not enough. They blew it up to get him on. And with the filibuster, you do not get these justices. And it's hard to kind of imagine what type of justices they would have gotten, especially because the Federal Society, and there's some good threads on this on Twitter for us to read, they just churn out zealots. The Republicans have for years wanted to remove the fact of people like Blackburn and others who actually read stuff and think about stuff, maybe talk to women and say, okay, well, maybe even though I'm a conservative, this is what I should do. They, no more suitors was the rallying cry. So you had the school of zealotry. And so these guys were never going to get 60 votes. And so they nuked the filibuster to do it. It wasn't so much that, yes, Clinton, Trump winning helped enable that. The reason I focus on the fact that they did this is that, well, we just won an election. And if we were willing to do the same tactics, DC would be a state. Voting rights would have passed. We would have an abortion law passed. We'd probably have expanded the court. Those are things you could do if we were willing to do the same things as the GOP and that moderate GOPers did. And if you don't do that, if you're not willing, if it's asymmetrical warfare, I'm not saying voting doesn't matter. I'm just saying if you are fighting asymmetrical warfare, you will lose because eventually you will lose elections. So what we're seeing now is in these states where they've gerrymandered the F. So you're in one of them, Wisconsin. So, and I'm writing about this for tomorrow. Josh Hawley came out, gloating to Batman while Batman's trying to untie himself. He's like giving his evil scheme. Like, here's what I'm doing. Laughing maniacally because he knows. And Kavanaugh effing put it in the concurrence. Was like, abortion's still legal in these states. Yeah. Which are either blue states or states like Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, where they're legal now because you have a Democratic governor. And, I think if you're a person with a uterus in Michigan or Pennsylvania, you might be a little nervous because Biden's approval ratings are below, Ishtar. You've got high gas prices and so much. And unless you're actively making this an issue or at least appealing to people who are worried about the financial, you could still lose those seats. Once that happens, it's gone. And Hawley says that's the plan. The plan is to make it so miserable. Where do you go? Well, I'm Jamie. I'm a very smart, bright lady. I don't want to live here. I'm going to go to California. Good, because we don't care if we lose California by a gazillion. Robyn will be back. We don't care if we lose, California by every person but Devin Nunes. Who cares? It's still only 2 senators, still only 54 electoral votes. And so you create this system where
I don't know how that happened.
Now Jamie's closer to me. We're saying that Hawley was talking about his very clear plan, and it's done in the past. It happened when racial terrorism in the South, where you have places like Alabama, 50% Black, South Carolina was majority Black, and you made, through racial terror, you made it and so bad they left, and diluting the political power that people had. And we're still with this today. So that's their goal. And Josh Hawley was upfront about it. It's like this, you make it so unpleasant, these people leave. So Arizona.
I mean, that's literally how high schools in small towns have worked forever.
Yeah.
Well, and it's what's been happening for years in the state that I left before I came to this state where I no longer have any rights, West Virginia. All of the young and educated people leave for the most part. as soon as they can. And, you know, the few people who try to stay, the state politicians just keep making things worse and worse, and they keep driving away the people who like they actually need, because they keep losing their tax base and are kind of forgetting about that. But that's the same thing. People in the state legislature will publicly say, oh, we don't want those people here, even though the state has no money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing that I think they really have not considered, perhaps because those passing these laws are very rich. Most of these states that are going to be barring abortion already have massive doctor shortages, massive OB-GYN shortages. Like, they do not have, I think, like, there are several counties in these areas that do not have one family physician.
Yep.
And they're going to say, like, the vast majority of doctors are pro-choice. The vast majority of OB-GYNs certainly are pro-choice. They're not going to have people in there to, like, take care of the babies that people do want, or the pregnancies that people do want. That is going to get so much more dangerous than it already is, which is,
don't worry. If you lose a baby, you'll just be sent to prison.
Yeah,
I know.
I mean, they don't care about the misery they inflict on the poor, certainly the poor people of color in those states.
Oh, yeah.
Liberals talk about, like, let those states go, sort of short-sighted, because, well, and that is also a larger issue with when you let Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, you know, basically say F you to people of color for voting rights, is because a situation where people of color are the vast, you know,
that's who's affected by these laws for the most part, especially the maternal mortality rate issues. Like,
they are in those states that are often white liberals dismiss. I mean, Oregon is me and, you know, a few other guys, black guys, and so it is not. So it's great here. But, you know, for myself, I look at my family and whatever. So when I'm voting, when I'm like, what I see from Democrats, are people, what are you going to do for my family, for my who couldn't get out, or for, you know, these folks? And the model minority thing doesn't work. Like, here's our Harvard educated, here's our press secretary. She's the first, and that's lovely or whatever. But I'm telling you, there are desperate people, Hispanic and Black, who are like, yeah, that's great. What about me? What are you going to do for me? And that is a challenge. And so what I am saying is, it's not that voting doesn't work. It's like Republicans are making it so it doesn't. Like, if you can overcome the voter suppression in these states, if you can overcome the gerrymandering, which you won't, because, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you can't get rid of Marjorie Taylor Greene. You can, these are the relatively few safe Democratic seats you can vote in your area for. But ultimately, there's, the idea, Democrats seem in this world of where, oh yeah, we'll just change Wisconsin. And the stuff I'm seeing is like, well, no, the reason we're saying that right now, and whenever I say we're at the peak of our powers, I'm accused of voter suppression with my close friend, Susan Sarandon. She's getting some tea right now. But we are at the peak of our powers right now. And when I'm seeing of like, oh, well, you've lost an actual right. So this is huge. Like, the loss of an actual right is huge. You've lost this right. Don't worry. And a woman has been forced to have a child in Texas, which we great if Democrats mentioned that or had her on. Like, with that in the reverse, this person would be on Fox News every effing day.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Had to have a child because of this abortion law that we, nothing happened against. And, if those things that these people, you're going to have to actively suffer. It's like, well, how long? Like, okay, until when? And it's like, oh, well, we can flip Kentucky. What? It's like, oh, we just need 60 seats because the president doesn't want to expand the court. That's kind of institutions and norms. And he's not about, maybe he'll have a commission about it, maybe, and maybe he'll have like oh man, that filibuster. Oh dear. It's like, okay, well, if you don't nuke the filibuster, there is no scenario where Democrats get 60 votes.
There's also no scenario where we get any of this back, is the thing. Like,
well, that's their. I'm saying,
I'm sorry, there's no voting scenario where like, oh, we, after like doing pretty much nothing for like a few years because we couldn't because of the filibuster, like there's another blue wave, and like, because every single person comes out and votes and stands in line for 2 days to vote, even though they got nothing the last time. And then we powered through, and then we finally get, 60 Democratic senators in office, and we pass all of the things. That's really unlikely to happen specifically because of the things that we're not passing.
Yeah, also, we're going to have to make it 62, considering.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky, like flipping.
Kentucky got a blue governor only because their last Republican governor was such a fucking psycho.
And these folks and our Democratic governor in Louisiana signed an anti-abortion bill. So, but
yeah, sending doctors to jail for 10 years.
There's the idea, and we, we could have filmed ourselves a new Marvel movie for what it cost to try to lose against McConnell in Kentucky. Is like, you're not, like, when I saw that as a plan, it's like horrifying. It's like, okay, well, we'll run just all we do is set 60 and then we hold the House, and it's like, oh, and do we fix inflation because there are people who are all of that. And it's like, okay, that's just not a plan. The actual only realistic plan is that it's like, well, look, what can the president do? He can't go and talk to Kristen Sinema. She's a mighty first-term senator. And I'm just like, okay, look, and I've been criticized for this. I just want to vent my own frustration on this. I was around in 2020. I feel like a lot of people weren't. So I just want to clarify. I was here and conscious, and I was promised that the reason we should rally behind the 79-year-old was because he had all this experience in Congress and he would be able to work with Republicans. So when I'm thinking of like, oh, he can deal with the guy who could deal with Mitch McConnell, you're saying, I should have asked. So will the senator who dresses quirky and tells you to go fuck yourself, and then that's it? Oh yeah, I've got nothing after that. Yeah. And if that's like, well, he has no magic wand, it's like, okay, well, if that's it, like, and no matter, and the fact that like you can't put any more pressure on her, even though all that's happened, even though the court is
like break her, she'll crumble. She's a very delicate flower.
The court and the court is clearly radicalized. So you have robed masters taking rights, overturning, long-time gun laws in states, and like, unless
Miranda rights, we don't have Miranda rights anymore. I feel like that's very important.
Also, probably all of us are currently in areas that border control could just pop in right now if they wanted to. I know I am, because Lake Michigan counts as a border.
Yeah.
So it is this idea that like, I'm not trying to like, and I've seen this in one of the comments before, hyping onto this. Someone's like, we have to stay united. If we don't stay united, the Republicans win. No, the Republicans win if we continue getting our asses kicked, and we are not prepared for what this current Republican Party is doing. Like even even in Michigan, the governor, if the governor and the attorney general stay, they will probably get impeached if they refuse to either pass or prosecute these anti-abortion laws. And that is what I compare, that type of hardball I compare to when it's like, well, why isn't Clarence Thomas being called to account for his obvious part in the coup? Well, we don't have the votes. What can you do? So you're dealing with, like, we know what will happen to Democratic attorney generals in these states with abortion bans who say, I'm not going to prosecute him. They're gone. They will be gone, either through sarcastic terrorism or actual vote.
Yep. And here in Wisconsin, like you mentioned, the super gerrymandered legislature is like ours is going to be even worse now because of the redistricting fund that we had here in Wisconsin. And this is a state where the polling hasn't changed in decades. It's like more than 70% of Wisconsinites, thought that Roe should be preserved. This is holding steady. It doesn't fucking matter. Our Democratic governor called an emergency session of the legislature that met on, I think, Wednesday for approximately 30 seconds before they gavelled the session back out because they said, we don't care that our fucking 1849 abortion ban is going to force an 11-year-old who was raped to carry a pregnancy to term against her will. But none of this matters because it's so fucking gerrymandered that all of their fucking seats are safe.
Yeah.
And we're only 6 seats away from Republican supermajorities in both houses, which would mean that even if Governor Evers got reelected, they'll be able to do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah. And the reality also is they couldn't have timed it better when you have, because it's interesting. I go back to when, we all knew this. When Biden was running, the idea would be that the economy, and I'm not trying to give plaudits to Trump, a lot of the economic conditions in 2019 was Obama's good work. But the idea is this will continue. They'll be low. And Biden even said this to some donors. It was like, nothing's going to fundamentally change. I'm not going to be like that crazy Warren chick. I'm not going to come in and change everything. It just won't be embarrassing. You won't have to think about politics anymore. And then, COVID came and it was like, I will be responsible and get this done. And the worst thing happened was that once Delta hit, the competence started to creak, right? Like and Republicans had already been going in 2 directions. So when Biden's approval ratings were somewhat similar they did with Obama, when they were somewhat high and the economy, things were getting a little bit better, they're like, oh, well, let's demonize people and let's hit them from this angle. So that's when he started getting the CRT and the trans bills.
But here one thing that I want to bring up with regards to that is that people kept saying, oh, Republicans, they want to keep abortion legal so they can keep running on it. Look at all the things that they've collected within the last couple of years to run on. Oh, the scary critical race theory. Oh, the scary gay and trans people. Oh, all the scary, it'd be super great if women never had sex at all. And then they're all like, yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah. Except when they're raped, which shouldn't be against the law. So
I think the people who tell you that about they want it are often, I found, either never Trumpers or again, those white cis, either pundits for right-leaning or left-leaning or outright, like the bulwark guys, like Tim Miller, Steve Schmidt, Anna Navarro. So Anna Navarro is out there horrified. And I like the lady, she's nice, but she's out there horrified. Oh my goodness, oh my, they banned, whatever. You worked for Romney in 2012. You wanted Romney to win. He was you even had a whole article about tactics that he could use to win the Latino vote and how Obama was failing Latinos, and that you were part of that mission. And if Romney had been elected in 2012, he was open about it, him and Ryan, about an abortion ban. And he would have appointed in 2012, he likely would have won 2 terms, because that's often what happens once you're in there. So you would have gotten the same result with Romney. So everyone who's like, somehow they're acting as if Trump ran on abortion bans. I'm sorry, you're saying,
McCain promised to appoint anti-choice judges too.
Yeah.
John Kerry said he wasn't opposed to it.
There's this weird implication. I don't know the gain. The commenters who are so very, or probably the Nancy Pelosi stands and whatever in our comments will say is all a genius ploy to get people to not like Trump and ignore the fact that the race of the Republican Party has had a 50-year long game to make women second-class citizens. And it's very important to focus only on Trump, which I think is probably a bad idea because Trump, he veered.
This is the thing. They think that if you just say no, it's just Trump, the rest of you are fine. That those people will go you know what? Yeah, no, we're okay. And that only I hate to put it this very mean way. There are certain tactics that only work if you're aspirational, if you're who people want to be. And unless like, which is like very rare these days. Like, we don't have a lot of people who are, you know, quote unquote aspirational in that way. Because we sort of, I think, culturally reject that. But unless you're like someone that people are like, oh man, I want to be like that person, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if if someone I think is like some huge dork is like, hey, you could be cool if only you ditch this other person that you like. I'd be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
I said that's the most popular girl in school in 5th grade. And
Trump veered from orthodoxy and only like immigration, because Republicans are really sort of, hey, I think we all love cheap labor. This could be more cheap labor for us, and isolationism. But otherwise, he adopted the existing Republican platform, which was to a success. And he himself understood the one area I can't veer from, because the white conservative, social conservative own this party, is abortion. And that's when he made very clear, I'm this guy. And when he brought in Pence, and but he was adopting what was existing. And this party has always been trying to do this. So this idea, and so when Pelosi's talking about a big, strong Republican party, well, that party wins elections. And every time they win an election, they have whittled down at the votes. And it's not like we take turns and you can hold them off and they're banging against the wall and wearing down, and it's slow time, then we could rebuild the damage they do each time. It's not. They're done with that. And I think if you're not willing to recognize that we're heading toward a fascist state, we're at war. It's just like if during the Civil War, you had the generals saying, well, why don't we just like talk for these guys, and they're getting shot. Then Lincoln's like, yeah, this isn't working. And that's what I'm saying. We are in war and it's not working. And one thing I want to throw to you guys about is I keep seeing, and and I know this goes to Robyn's thing about aspiration. There's this aspiration from so many, I found, Democrats, that Republicans just sit down and shut up. They, no matter what happens, they will vote for the Republican candidate, which is obviously true because John McCain beat the dynamic and charming Barack Obama, and Romney was able to win. And you know, it's clearly not true. And if you go back, comparing Republican losses to Democratic losses, going back to when I started voting in 1992, once Clinton won, every time there was a Democratic victory and a Republican loss, Republicans came back fiercer, angrier, mutating like a virus, wiping out the ones before who were deemed weak enough to let it happen. So every George H.W. Bush, Connecticut moderate, Gingrich was like, get those fuckers out of here. We're having it's my revolution. And you got Gingrich. And then when Obama won, and everyone's like, oh, well, liberalism forever. Obama won, our huge, everything's over. It's Return of the Jedi. And instead, you got the Tea Party, the angrier, vicious type of folk, where even Obama thought, like, there was some event where he was kind of joking around with Michelle Bachmann as if it's the old days of Ted Kennedy and some other Republican where it's just punch clock villainy. We're just joking. Well, no, she fucking hates you.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just go to the club afterward, you know, no. And again, it kept mutating. And then, so when liberals talk about if Clinton had won, I voted for Clinton twice. It'd been great if she had won. When they don't recognize that you would have gotten even earlier the response that her, you know, a Marjorie Taylor Greene mutated force that you got with Biden, you definitely would have gotten the first woman president even earlier, more violence, more like, when you're not recognizing you're dealing with a fascist cult, and instead you have a party, the only defense.
Well, because the idea that they're going to get so crazy and then other people are going to float on. And just in certain ways, I do think that there's a point there. Like, one area where I do think we have an opportunity is in the fact that they are turning back into scolds. Whereas they tried for a long time to try and present us as the scolds, because we were like, hey, don't be racist, don't be, terrible human beings. They're now back on their, no, don't be gay, no one have sex shtick. And I absolutely feel like we need to milk that for all it is worth.
Absolutely.
All these motherfuckers are out here being like, oh, let's do Liz Estrada. No, let's not fucking do Liz Estrada. No. First of all,
although, like, please stop having sex with Republicans.
Yeah, like, I wasn't doing that in the first place, which is probably why they're so miserable.
Yeah. There's always an article upset that often that because they feel obligated to women's bodies, that women were not wanting to have sex with Republicans. Yeah. It's like, but you hate us. Even Charlie Kirk, it was just like, I hate liberal white women. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're probably not gonna, that's not very compelling.
I mean, think of, they are constantly, every single time a study comes out where it's like, liberal people don't want to date Republicans. They're all like, you're all bigots, why do you hate us?
You think I'm a pedophile. Like, I don't know how.
Something they're upset about.
My entire Tinder profile says gender doesn't matter, not being a Republican does. That is like my entire Tinder profile.
Mine says, if I ever bore you, it'll be with a knife. I'm kidding, it does not. That is a quote from Louise Brooks. But
so, my experience in the corporate world and whatever is looked at that of just, you see what has happened to Republican leadership, how vicious, how they wipe away what's, we lost, who stood in the way of that, who helped make that loss. They don't necessarily blame the voters. It's like, these motherfuckers fucked up. We're getting rid of them, and we're going to come back angrier and meaner. Like the old lady who told in South Carolina, my home state, there's an old lady came up to Jeb Bush and just like, I kind of like you. You're nice. Have a conversation. I'm going to vote for Trump. Why? Because I need a son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And no matter how nice Obama had been, no matter all of that, this lady wanted someone who's just going to rip the guts out of us. And instead, we have a system where, again, in the private sector, if you look at companies that fail or don't fail, Republicans have the model of a successful company. We have the company of like, our latest movie flopped. Well, it's the viewer's fault. They I don't know why they couldn't understand, the latest M. Night Shyamalan film.
Not smart enough.
They're not smart enough or whatever.
Let's make sure no one, anyone will attack all the young people who might have been slightly critical of the project while it was being made. And
Can we get new executive? No, we have the same executives no matter. So the executives will stay the same no matter whether our products succeed or don't succeed. Yes. Now, so Nancy Pelosi will lose the House twice and remain in leadership. Now, Paul Ryan was speaker for 3 years. He was kind of understood. It's like, yeah, I cannot continue as speaker if I leave the House. And he gave the whole kind of be with my family type excuses, but it's sort of understood. Boehner, even he said, I can't Jedi mind trick Obama into signing away the Affordable Care Act. He was still eventually forced out.
Because they were like, fuck it, we don't care. We're just going to keep getting crazier and crazier people. Pardon my language, until like we get what we want, because people just give up and they're like, oh, honey, you can just have that. That's fine.
Yeah.
We won't bother you.
Cantor was voted out. You have Elise Stefanik, who's young enough to have been a normal person. And you've made good points that it's not about age, like Maxine Waters and Barbara Lee are great. Yeah. But I do think the time you're removed away from living like a normal person makes it very hard to kind of connect on these issues, especially when you are potentially not on the front lines of what's happening. And so at least
it's the same reason why I'm suspicious of journalists who are like born into money. Like,
oh yeah. So Elise Stefanik was able to go in a grocery store and notice, wow, the price of eggs has increased. Whereas again, even if a Democratic leader, and again, this includes Clyburn, it doesn't matter, because we have this weird thing of if a young person criticizes Clyburn, he's a racist. How dare you criticize this black man? How dare you criticize?
Or even just like, you don't understand what he did in the past. And there's a lot of, you don't understand what they did in the past. And there's not a lot of, we need a little bit more Janet in there. Like,
well, but we're also, you're supposedly a youth-centric So you're not CBS. You're saying you're in MTV, but you are trying to appeal. So you want to appeal to young people, but you are just terrible to them. And the other thing I've seen that's very concerning was that, well, young people suck. They don't come out for us anyway. Who cares about them? And I've seen this argument made in often in the theater community with failing theaters, mind you.
Yeah.
Will say young people, they all watching those Marvel movies and CGI, and they won't come see our plays that are fucking depressing and whatever. And it's like, well, Hamilton, everyone saw Hamilton. We won't do, yeah, you could do something like Hamilton. I mean, that was very no one's, young people don't come see shows or whatever. And we just need to focus on older people, who are our primary theater audience. And then I have to remind them that we are mortals. So older people die and the younger people become older. It happened to me. It was crazy. I was 20. It was like the mid 90s. Everything was going great. And now here I am. I'm, in spitting distance of 50. And you will
I choose to remain ageless.
You will lose. So if you're
where do I get the baby blood? Isn't that what does it?
Exactly. Yeah. You will lose.
Stephen and I were talking about moisturizing earlier. So
you will lose. You are not going to, the idea that your theater audience hits 40 and suddenly will come in and here's all my money or whatever, even though I never connected with you when I was younger. And the same with this party, the idea that, okay, well, we've said you guys don't vote, you're whiny and entitled and ponies, whatever. And you should have been voting for us anyway, no matter what. You will magically turn 45 and be like, oh yeah, I should vote for Democrats and not Republicans or not vote at all. It's just weird. And it is what's dangerous is because, again, we are facing a fascist movement. And something that I remember Jeet here being unfortunately wrong about was when people were like myself, it's like, oh my God, Trumpism seems like a fascist movement. And he was like, tut, tut. Fascist movements historically have been youth movements. These are mostly just old people at Trump rallies, but that wasn't the case. A lot of young people, and if you look at Ben Shapiro's young, and the Matt Walsh, the Daily, he's like 36 years old.
The Proud Boys, the Charlie Kirk people, like they have like
huge youth movement,
extremely, and the thing is, they actually like make them prominent and work to make them prominent. Whereas we're like, no. Either shut up for a while or like, unless you have a very famous relative and would like to have a show on MSNBC or CNN, during which you don't say anything like,
well, someone
we got to check your family tree first, your little like heritage, and then we might let you speak, but we'll wait until you're a little gray. How does that work?
Well, it's someone who's whining about, I always get these whines of like, oh, AOC, always on camera, and we need to have the good, they're always the good ones, right? So it's like, oh, Sharice Davids and Lauren Underwood, who are lovely, but it's like no one's stopping them from being on TV. No one's stopping them from doing Instagram lives. But you know what happens? And I've seen this again in the private sector. The ones who are on the fast track, they say, oh, you're on the track. So like, if you stick around and keep your head down and don't get in trouble, in 60 years, you might get somewhere. But it's very clearly, this is what you do and how you engage. Yeah. And this is what I've seen.
And don't break the rules. But what I'm going to say is that is actually related to so much like more general misogyny. There is no more hated person in the entire world than a like woman who like garners any kind of attention at all for any reason. It is, you may as well just stab people directly in the face. It's the worst thing a woman can do. Women are supposed to be seen and not heard, and they have to strike a perfect balance between not necessarily being unattractive. Like they can't be someone that Republicans could say are ugly, but they also can't be like sexy. So they have to be in this perfect, like they have to have like, that
or boring
newscaster hair, tone down everything. And, then and be like demure and occasionally say something a little bit sassy that you can make a meme out of. But other than that, mostly quiet. That way you can maybe, fingers crossed, not step on any toes. But even with that, it is difficult. We hate women.
Well, exactly, but especially within the Democratic Party, and again, I've seen this in comments on Wonkette and elsewhere of like which I resent. Like, if you don't like AOC, don't like, but don't try to grab some nice black lady to insult her with. It's like, no. Here's the good one. It's not that I hate women, as you said. No, Robyn, I don't hate women. Lauren Underwood is the good one. And it's like, okay, well, her feed is, again, could have been written by Nancy Pelosi or her staff. It is very specific. And again, nothing against her, but it's very clear that she was on what the current Democratic Party has as a leadership track. So what she does, she comes in and she's like, here's all the good stuff I've done. And here's how I've been responsible and governed responsibly. It's all very Democratic Party 1990 type stuff.
She also represents my home district, which is normally red as fuck.
Yeah.
She's
trying, and they say like she has to keep your head down, she can't, which is fine. But the problem is that
no one needs to keep their head down. Keep your head up is like literally like what we need everyone to do right now. Heads up.
Have a party that's
terrible posture.
Yeah, so you have a party that's actively not doing that. So you have like Bobart, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and even Ted Cruz with a podcast. So it's just like, well, but he's a Gen Xer. He's young compared to our folks. So it's sort of this youth movement is this fascist movement is a youth movement that's tuned in with people, that's on Spanish language television, that is aware, and we are not. And just cheerleading this current structure is obviously not enough. And what I've seen, and again, comparing it to every failed either nonprofit area or private sector, when I've witnessed failing enterprises, when I see you figured out who to blame, you've already decided we're going to lose. So whenever I see Susan Sarandon trending, it usually means something has happened at the Supreme Court. That is like, it's almost.
I heard that name more than I did.
And I see her name trending, literally, that is how I knew that Roe had been overturned. Can you imagine how fucked up that is? Also, look, I love Rocky Horror. I love Bull Durham. I cried during Stepmom. I'm a boring middle-aged man. But
I'm sorry, I think that's really adorable. I was actually just going to say I've heard Susan Sarandon's name more this week than in an entire year and a half in the Rocky Horror Shadowcast.
But when you're still insisting that the last, and granted, we won a few elections since 2016, but okay. But when you're insisting that we lost this election because of this middle-aged actor, when Clinton had in Ohio, she had like LeBron in Ohio, she had like Lady Gaga, so you had like actual celebrities that young people knew, not just me. And you're still saying that this woman cost me is fundamentally absurd, or like the idea that it's obviously Bernie Sanders' fault. It's like, well. In a world, as if
Witches of Eastwick is a really good movie. Shares in that.
But like in a world where to me, it just looks like, one, you have no plans for you're just who's to blame for this, supposed to how we resolve it. But also, what does it say if it's put in a vacuum where Trump had a glide path, where Trump did not have every past GOP nominee saying, no, I'm not voting for this guy. I mean, they didn't French kiss Clinton, but they still said, I'm not voting for this guy. The sitting governor of Ohio said, I'm not voting for this guy. And
we invited him to speak at the Democratic convention, even though he really hates women.
So, I mean, okay.
But so he's so calm and not crazy.
So
people like crazy.
It's just not that we need to vote. Sorry. It's just that there can't be any liberals who ever say anything negative. And then we need to also have a lot of sister soldier moments. But when we bring out and insult women of either color or whatever for being too liberal, they obviously can't actually say, fuck you, because then they are helping Republicans.
Yes.
Even though I just pulled them out in the
fire. Because here's the one truth that we all must agree on. When we criticize Democrats from the left, Republicans are like, you know what? You have a point. They should do more about, universal health care and child care and criminal justice reform. Why aren't they doing that? I'm going to go vote for someone doing the exact opposite of that. Like, no. But like, at the same time, it's totally fine to, you know, I understand that it is considered like a very like well-worn strategy to like punch left, bow right. But you're the one insulting like the actual things that, you know, liberals are supposed to believe, while we're supposed to compliment Democrats for being kind of conservative. Like, it's not.
Yeah,
it's just weird, and I don't get it.
Democratic leaders are saying we need a strong fascist party.
Yes, we don't. Well,
yeah.
we have. I mean, I don't. Well, strong parties win. And I would have to disagree slightly with the person who like Ted Cruz, like this idea. He is doing his job. He votes for all the stuff. He's out there publicly, day to day, promoting the dogma, which is his job. And like, I think a lot of on the liberal, just, you know, the reason we say we don't like AOC and the others is because it's like, you know, we have this idea of the good representative sits down, is writing bills all day, and it's not deigning to engage with the public and not doing this sort of stuff. And it's talking about this bipartisan bill they passed to honor usually cops or soldiers. They love that. Those are the stuff, you know, here's the cop day. Cops are wonderful day, stuff like that. And that's their predominant job. And it's not, your job is to get elected and to drive a narrative and keep those to gain power. Republicans have realized that, and they've been using it. And so, you know, this is not about a vent fest. This is just sort of, I would hope, an intervention, at least again, when you are blaming voters and other members of your party. And Robyn had appealed to people about this this weekend. But when you're doing that after repeated losses, when Miranda is one of the losses, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about we lost Miranda. But like,
that's a very big deal. I don't know.
Miranda Monroe and the Fourth Amendment for the vast majority of the population of this country. That happened in the last 3 weeks.
We're saying only that we won't change our strategy. The only solution is to keep voting, even though when Sinema and Manchin tanked the ability to pass voting rights acts, it would stop the super, like, we are in a serious crap hole that is not about the usual, the idea of like, okay, well, everyone will come to their senses, everyone will, it's unrealistic. And what I'm seeing is you understand it's unrealistic. You know it's not going to work, but you are preparing the Susan Sarandon defense. And look, I'm being, you know, hauled off to a Ron DeSantis re-education camp in 2025, and you're tweeting about goddamn Bernie Sanders and fuck you, because that's not, I don't care. Like, I need to know about what is reality right now. And often I've seen this in the comments as well, is that the reason we keep dwelling on this about you know, Bernie Sanders is that he's still alive. It's like, okay, well, I get that he's still alive, and that's frustrating for you, but he's, you know,
I think it's more because they think that here's what I do think. I think that they think if they keep harping on it and keep driving everyone insane about it and keep saying everyone who voted for Bernie is like basically Satan, why don't you understand this? You are all evil. That those people will go, oh my God. I suddenly realized I don't want to disappoint these wonderful people who are calling me a huge asshole. I will never, ever vote for someone I like again. I will absolutely check with, you know, various people on Twitter before doing that. Like, we need to make sure it never happens again. Well, you know, there are a lot of things we could make sure it never happens again. But like,
yeah. Also, it's like,
maybe it wasn't that great of an idea to begin with, to be like, this is the only person who's allowed to run this year, and then be like, why are other people running? Like, no, it's an open primary. You can't be mad about that.
I remember this whole concept of, you know, what is concerning to me is this living in a world where, because Biden did win because the threat of Trump was understood. He was obviously president. And so whenever people like you, me, I know Jamie at the time, but I'm presuming Jamie was doing it as well, were saying, I think Trump could win in the Rust Belt or Maine. People like Rachel Maddow and others were saying, you are out of your mind. The blue wall is impenetrable. Like, and, you know,
it's going to be such a landslide.
And, you know, Obama had won by 10 points in Michigan, and he won Wisconsin, where, you know, Paul Ryan, who was on the ticket, lived by 7 points. And so you had a complete collapse there. He won by 2 points in Ohio. You had a 10-point collapse in those states. Now, you can blame Susan Sarandon. That is your right. You can blame Bernie Sanders. That is your right. But maybe NAFTA, TARP, there are things that are happening similar to like when I was warning people in 2020 about Biden's weak support with Hispanic voters. It's like there's no civil rights movement bill with Hispanic voters. There's a good chance that he's not going to do as well. Why would you assume he's going to do as well as Obama did with that group? And it's like, no, don't worry about it. We've got Nevada became close. Nevada might be gone in the fall because of his you know, underwater for Latino voters. Border towns in Texas and so forth, where, you know, where Democrats had used to dominate, potentially might be flipped. And it's sort of like, we need to address these specific issues. And I think what's interesting when we talk about the abortion issue, you have talked about, Robyn, how the sense of it was wrong for someone to ever talk about the economy. And to me, it's like, look, there are probably, and it's not my vote to say this because I don't have a uterus or whatever, but when Obama was winning Iowa and Ohio and a lot of these states as a visibly Black man, by the way, so they're not all racist. They were aware. They weren't just.
A lot of people did vote for Obama. Continue.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
A lot of people who voted for Obama were fucking huge racists.
Yes. I not enough.
I thought the racism was going to be over now. Why are people still complaining? Ew, it's so
not
rude.
Obviously enough where that is the deal breaker, right? So, you know, it was clear that there was an economic message that resonated with certain people. And so for me, I like my Black ass being alive. And if someone is going to keep my Black ass alive by voting just for a higher minimum wage or for whatever, like if you're bribe the hell out of them, I don't care. You don't need to like me if I still have my body autonomy or my rights, if that's what's going to do it. Heal to those. So it seemed like there's that's going to have to be what happens this election. My concern is that people believe this election will be about abortion rights. And in certain states, that's not going to tip the needle, or you're going to get someone who's like, yeah, well, how are you? One, they're going to ask, well, okay, if I vote for you, how are you going to bring back my reproductive freedoms? And if you're him and ha, they're going to go, well, okay, I'm going to vote for the person who says that my gas will be $2 a gallon again.
Yeah.
And that is a very legitimate fear. So I would just say we need to really address these economic issues in these places if we want to hope to, and we just need to realize we're dealing with gangsters and plan accordingly. When we've had this 2-year battle about the filibuster because of these two losers, and even when the president's sort of still embracing a lot of institutionalism, we're in a bad shape because we're dealing with
institutions don't like us. They don't. They're not working for us. If something's not working, stop doing it. It's like, or at least stop saying this is our way. The institutions are going to come and rescue us. That's like,
amazingly, this is actually how our infallible constitution that we are supposed to worship. This is exactly what it aimed to create. It was never supposed to be a criminal justice system. No.
Well,
no, it was not.
The Supreme Court is a radical right-wing,
fascist judicial arm of the government.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what Americans like. This is the thing. Americans love that. I saw the plan where you just lie to people and like show them, you know, CGIs of people being brutally executed, and then they're like, "Yay, I feel safe and happy." And that's all they want. They don't actually need the people to be going to jail. They just need or to be executed. They just need to feel like they are. You know, that's because we're a very sick people, a lot of us.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, you know, you have to fundamentally address this. So the old rule would be, oh gosh, darn it, you know, I don't like the state of the court now. It's a little bit to the right, and then, you know, maybe when someone dies, I'll replace them or whatever. Right? You know, it is a direct threat to democracy right now, and they're unaccountable. And what we've done since the leak was to make life easier for Brett Kavanaugh.
And apparently plan sing-alongs of God Bless America, which like
ew.
I thought
a good song.
That song to the Republicans, like after like the 9/11 fever dropped down. Like really like singing a song about God and country is how you're going to respond to the fascist theocracy saying that women aren't full citizens? Really?
Yeah. Not so great. Well, because they think they're like, oh, they're the patriotic ones. No one actually fucking.
No, you actually have to, especially in the court, and I've seen this. So when Eli Misto talked about it, and I've seen again, a lot of blue MAGA types will be, stop talking about that because it can't happen because look, you know, we don't have the vote, so we can't convince anyone, and we're weak and we're helpless. Please vote for us because that is how the average citizen really responds to. Just like, just give us some more, you know, and that is not the fact there's no fire in the belly, no sense of this won't stand on my watch. And look, you know, everyone will say I'm somehow helping Republicans. If I wanted to help Republicans, I would just retire, become a Republican You know, do you know how dumb Candace Owens is and how much more money she makes?
You would make so much money.
I could tap dance like nobody's business. It says, okay, just kill me last, guys.
I can't. I'm a brunette. I don't think that's not allowed. Jamie, you have a chance.
Dye your hair.
I
am fighting for my life.
I mean, can you even see it? No. No, I would look horrible with all blonde hair.
According to every movie, you would just get some Clairol and a pair of scissors while the mob is chasing you, right?
Oh, yeah.
A pair of scissors, then go in the ladies' bathroom.
How long and this come back 4 hours.
It's like, how does she do that?
It's very dark.
But, you know, I'm just sort of fighting for my life here. So I'm telling you how normal people are responding. Hispanic voters, you know, Black voters, working class voters who aren't also tuned in, they respond to strength. You know, like remember Ron DeSantis, who talks about this won't stand, F you. He gets angry. People want to see passion and anger, not like, and when he says, you know, here's my, like in Florida, where he kind of screwed us even further with the maps. Because like the legislator said, here's our racist map. And he's like, not racist enough.
Yeah.
And they
when you throw crazy shit out there, people go along with you because they're like, yeah, this guy seems to know what's going on. You do it with enough authority.
And like this idea of like, you know, it is interesting because I had raised concerns again because I'm fighting for my life. So, okay, in 2024, if Biden doesn't run again, and there was this whole thing of, well, after obviously be Kamala Harris, it's like, oh, she's been kind of tied up with administration that's in the toilet. The Biden administration has given her no support. They gave her literally Vietnam as a pet issue, which is like the border is Vietnam. That is like saying go solve. You know, that is not what you give someone when you want them to succeed. And meanwhile, he gives the lady who's been stabbing him in the back repeatedly a prominent position, negotiate not John Ossoff or Raphael Warnock, who gave them the Senate. He gives Kristen Sinema the core negotiating, who just has to show up, right?
Because eventually, if you're nice enough to her, she'll maybe give you some little thing sometime, because that is how we know people work, right?
Yeah. So he set up like, okay, well, how is Harris your heir apparent now? Because obviously Sinema has no loyalty to the party. Why wouldn't she run in 2024 on the I got you the guns and the infrastructure? And I've already seen that. I wrote about when
that dude
saying that. So, and I said, okay, well, look, again, as someone just fighting for his life in 2024, we probably need someone who's going to win Wisconsin. And will beat DeSantis or Trump in Wisconsin. And well, obviously Harris will. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe like Gretchen Whitmer or whatever. No, obviously Harris, you hate Black women. It's like, no, I mean, I know some Black women, I like them, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know how would she necessarily do better than Hillary Clinton in those states? Because obviously she will, and she didn't. It's because people are racist and they're terrible and misogyny. You're reinforcing racism. It's like, again, I just don't want bad people to win. And again, we have
she was like out here setting the world on fire. Yeah, there would be a decent chance of her doing that, but she really isn't, and that is extremely concerning. Like,
well, yeah,
also, we need to remember that, and I'm sorry this is true. Like, if COVID hadn't happened, Trump would still be president right now. Like, I really do believe that. And like, we got a huge bump because of it, and because of states making it easier that year for people to vote, which they've been doing the opposite ever since.
Well, and Republicans are very aware of that. Like, this was why Trump, and because Trump stupidly told his supporters not to vote through mail. But yes, against those, I mean, leading into before COVID, the whole plot was, well, even though the economy's fine and everything, he's mean. And that is appealing to a certain demographic. It wasn't to a lot of people. But, in those states, when Biden won, if you look at Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, Hillary Clinton had maxed out the Black vote and Black women. There's not much where you can go. She was at 92%. So where Biden did better was like he performed about 10 points, in some places 10 points more than she did amongst white voters, which is how you win some of those states, like Wisconsin. So all I was asking was, how can what you've seen, where she's already saddled to a administration underwater, and she's given Vietnam as her pet project, she's done nothing to kind of put her out there.
We need to stop being afraid of strong personalities, especially women with strong personalities. Like, I hate to say it, Republicans are doing better than we are in terms of like being accepting of women with strong personalities and candidates with strong personalities, because people are, have this idea that if you're just super, super bland, and then no one can object to you, and then therefore they'll vote for you. But that is not actually how human nature works at all for any reason. No one is, stop being a fucking Taylor Swift song. Early in her career, where she was like, "Oh, I'm the super great girl next door, and and the boy doesn't like me because I'm not, the beautiful like cheerleader person." I don't know. I don't really know how that song goes.
Let's not drag her into this.
Yeah. Well, no one in leadership, especially a man, has infantilized or insulted Green or Bobart. They've always been, been very deferential to her.
Yeah, and they're not like, "Oh my God, I just wish she would shut up." Like, they don't do that.
Not Chuck Schumer, like reading Maxine Waters' The Riot Act on the Senate floor. No Republican has done that. And when a Republican has gone up against her, they've been called on the carpet. So Nancy Mace, Dan Crenshaw, and others, it is not. And what's scary is that this is the power they've had in the minority. So in the majority, when they're going to get there, and this is what, when we talk about the vote, like, you don't know what you're dealing with this fascist party, and I don't believe they fully do. Because again, when they talk about the world where Hillary won, and of course she would have then been able to do all these great things, like I know they would have impeached her for emo-related felonies and so forth. But now you understand that Biden and Harris are going to get impeached, and if they take the House or potentially the Senate, and they will probably strip most of the more inconvenient as payback for agreeing. They're going to strip AOC, Maxine Waters, particularly Maxine Waters, because it's be especially hurtful, of their committee assignments, put them back in committees. They were going to go full blood, justifying all of it. And we just need to escalate. To me, when I don't see escalation, so when after the sort of drive-through confirmation for Amy Coney Barrett, and everyone was like, well, that was just ridiculous. Well, you're gonna see something, but we didn't escalate in response.
Yeah.
And I'm just left like, everyone's saying, well, true leadership is to lie about how terrible your political opponents are, which apparently is what I've seen from Blue MAGA about Biden complimenting McConnell, but on telling he was most recently on Jimmy Kimmel, so the same. But to me, it's one thing to call him like a magnificent bastard. Oh man, he runs circles around me. He's so evil. But when he says a man of his word, then I'm just like, I don't understand. Like he didn't just, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, he held that Senate seat open. He had the ability to do it. That Supreme Court seat open, he had the ability to do it. Fine. McConnell not only did that, he made up a rule that he later broke.
Yeah.
And laughed in your face. And like that is fundamentally, he's not a Dr. Doom honorable villain. He's more like he's not Vito Corleone or whatever. It's like, I will not break this peace today, but my son will gun all of you down.
Yeah.
So
doesn't even have like the interesting like backstory that some of the supervillains and anti-heroes get. It's just like, no, sorry, like it's not interesting. This guy's just fucking evil.
Yeah. Like, no, yeah. No, Mitch McConnell doesn't have like a really great origin story. He's just an asshole.
Well, he's just evil, and then so he gets to present.
People like the idea of an honorable Mitch McConnell. For some reason, they're like, "Oh man, imagine that narrative, imagine that storyline. That would be amazing." Because they'd be like, "Oh, but he's an old guy who probably wants things to stay the same forever."
Yeah, well, no, I mean, they just want to go and hang out with him and Strom Thurmond at the fucking country club. Like, that's what our fucking elected leaders say.
Well, it's just this country club mentality, and I think that goes back to when it as a party that potentially represents the interests of women of color, people of, in general, who were never part of that country club. So you get anyone would be like, oh no, this guy's a fucking asshole, because there's no deference for me. I'm not part of that country club. And I think when you're led by someone who's very part of that country club and part of that system, it becomes very hard to realize. I mean, you're kind of looking at a Buchanan type presidency of just complete obliviousness to and my acknowledging this does not mean I secretly support Trump or want Trump back, or I'm being paid off. The latest thing I've seen is that every progressive Black person is being paid off, and I was obviously a Sanders, and I'm so deep cover Sanders supporter that I was highly critical of Sanders in 2016 and supported Hillary Clinton, but it was all part of my master plan to later criticize Democratic leaders later, because I'm secretly a Bernie bro.
That is wonderfully complex.
I love the people who get mad at me because like I insufficiently love Joe Biden. I fucking moved back to Wisconsin to work on the fucking 2020 election and get him elected here.
Yeah.
But God forbid I want someone who will actually try to fucking do something as my constitutional rights are being stripped away.
Yes. Well, and they also try to make.
And I'm just an anarchist, so like, but like that is actually literally true.
Listening to my anarchist friends a little bit more, I'm like, maybe there was something they missed, because this whole Republic thing is not looking great right now.
Yes. Well, the concept of doing something a kind of criticism, that to ask for that is your Veruca assault. That became the meme. Which is so you have time to do that when you are physically not doing something, or when you're deemed, or the something to do is to have voted in a past election, which again is in the past. We don't have time machine. If you were just obsessed with 2016, but also feverishly working on a time machine, like you know, I mean, at least the Scarlet Witch had a plan. She wasn't just saying, "I want my children back. I want my." She's like, "I'm gonna kill her motherfucker and get my kids back." But it's at least a plan, an objective to do that. It's not just like, "Oh well, I mean, it's a bummer." It's like, okay, well,
here's the thing where I do feel really bothered is that, like, I've been, you know, basically on the like, hey, okay, so what can we do? How do we get, you know, people places to stay when they are coming, you know, to other states? How do we, you know, get that organized? And there are so many fucking men in my mentions being like, well, you know who is actually really terrible is Bernie Sanders. And this is what we need to be discussing right now, not what you're talking about. And I'm like, no, I don't, like, why? Why does that have to be the topic of every single fucking conversation that you personally really don't like Bernie Sanders? I don't fucking care anymore. I don't care. Can we please, in other words, we could be talking about like logistics and what to do in a situation where people are losing their goddamned reproductive rights, and you're like, but can't we talk about why I don't like Bernie Sanders?
But Bernie Sanders,
and it's all fucking men. Every woman in my goddamn feed is like, what can we do? Who do we donate to? Here's 1,000 places to donate to. Every man is like, you know, well, in my mentions, most of the men I follow are normal, nice human beings. But I have a lot of weird ass reply guys who are like, but Bernie Sanders, people voted for him and it was against the law. And why aren't they being arrested right now?
He was not apparently pro-abortion. He wasn't pro-choice enough, or this and that. And even though our own leadership has supported anti-choice candidates, so it's like we will.
But that's different.
Even after
I don't. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there.
We're in the party for anti-choice people. We can't tell them to go away.
How hard?
I respect. I mean, I'm writing about the West Coast offense. So my state, Oregon, and Washington, and California, providing a safe harbor for women who need abortions. Obviously, there's going to be, they're funding that to be able to deal with the expansion. Hopefully, the idea is that we can get that there will be funds somehow to. It'd be great if the federal government say we're going to fund travel for this, or we're going to protect or send troops in. I mean, can it, you know, JFK sent troops, some sort of federal response, because in the history of our government, if you leave things to the states or to voters in those states, minorities do not get right. The federal government has to uphold them. So without the Supreme Court or the federal government and a radicalized Supreme Court, so when people are in their institutional minds, I've mentioned this before, I was watching the play, the theater I'm on the board of had done Thurgood, and you're watching this, it's like, oh, it's adorable. He's actually making legal arguments and people are listening to them and coming to conclusion, as opposed to like every argument he made to this current court, they would have laughed in his face. It's like, that's nice. and you know, of course we're not going to desegregate the schools. We'll find some BS. That's not in the, there's nothing in the Constitution about that. And your arguments, he was making arguments that Clarence Thomas has rejected and others have rejected. So of course, so this is such a radical to not have the courts to your defense. My wife's a lawyer made this point. Like we've always had, you know, they've had the courts as a barrier to that, of slapping down the worst excesses from the states. And without that, we are in deep trouble. You've got to fix that. And there's no this long game of, well,
and you have to go big or go home. Like incrementalism isn't going to work right now. Well, I know people enjoy it and love it and fetishize it, but it's not, literally just not going to work right now. We need a little bit like nonviolent propaganda of the deed happening.
Well,
like,
forget folks in their 50s who will serve past my, you know, who might outlive me on the court. We're talking about like even the oldest. So Clarence Thomas, who's been on it 30, could serve another 15, like just by the RBG standards, he could serve another 15, 16 years. And he might selectively retire under a Republican. So if DeSantis wins in 2024, Mama, he will definitely, oh yeah, I'm going to go fishing with my wife, the coup plotter, and retire blissfully in happiness and replace me with one of my clerks who's a complete, for, you know, even worse. So
maybe they'll pick that fun lady who's now on the federal court in Florida.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
the 20-year-olds in finance, and everyone was wanting to talk about, well, she went to the University of College, and she's so on. It doesn't matter. All they care about is that she is going to rule the ways they want. We are dealing with we are in bad shape, and I only again dwell on this. It's like you've got to go. I was horrified because I'm looking at stuff like our leaders do not fundamentally understand the threat that we are on. When you're telling people to go vote, when you've already tried to pass voting rights reforms that had to address the complete crazy gerrymandering. And we were talking again about providing the sanctuaries for women to abortions on the West Coast and so forth. But as Josh Hawley said, you're going to leave Wisconsin. You would leave. You would leave if you were somewhere. It's a lot to ask someone with no body autonomy to stay in these states. And even in Georgia, it's controversial. I've seen a lot of white liberals saying, the film industry needs to pull out of Georgia. Problem is, the first blow, it's very complex. If you do that, if you do these sort of sanctions, to these economic sanctions, you crush people of color the first.
Because that's like what a lot of the things that are being filmed in Georgia right now are being, made and produced and starring people of color.
Yes. And from the top, just the general, or like if you do tourism, the people who work in those, often women of color, are working in the hotels and whatever. So if you do this, then you create a sense of where you're hurting them. They have no and then and in the long term, what do you gain if you wind up if white liberals, a lot of these states have gotten more liberal because white liberals moved into those states. If white liberals not, if they're saying no, we're just going to go to California and New York and Oregon and every safe blue state, there's just, well, it won't last. In a year, there'll be a nationwide abortion ban, or even more, so.
Because they have the Electoral College, they literally do not care how many people live in their states. Like, they don't care.
Yeah, it's like Russia invading Ukraine, and the Ukrainian president understood, we're at war now. I've at least got to dress differently, right? I've got to put on. He's not singing "God Bless America." It's like I got to put on combat boots. Like this is not, because if I'm seeing "God Bless America" in front of the Ukrainian house, I'm going to die. Like we're actively at war, and it's been a soft coup, slowly and steadily. I mean, I think what Liz Cheney and others found annoying was more of that, like, look, we're already achieving our soft coup. We don't need to kind of go hard coup on it, Trump. Like, you lost. Yeah. We'll bring in someone else later.
Don't be so gauche.
Exactly. So I don't know. What I'm hearing from the responses is just, look, I could shut up. We could all shut up and we could go away. And I'm sorry, as much as you think that the combined powers of myself and Susan Sarandon are costing Democrats seats in Ohio or whatever, that's not what's gonna happen. Is we are walking into a complete, catastrophic situation, and the fact that we are not prepared for it is frightening. Like, I don't, it is frightening. And I don't, despite the fact of even the past 4 years, they've set all these things into place to overturn any possible election, right? Like, so any outcome they don't like. So, yeah, it's great. You've got the Proud Boys, you've got the button men, but Josh Hawley's still walking free. Ted Cruz is still walking free. Like, I don't get why. Like, how is that not connect? Like, you brought in Ted Cruz as law professor to say that there was no legal merit to objecting, that it was all part of a coup, and these sitting senators were part of enabling a coup attempt. It's like right there, right? And just there's no response of like what would you, Jamie? What's your take on that? Or
I mean, well, and I could rant about like the feebleness of this fucking Justice Department all day, which I do think is a big part of it. But it's not just Merrick Garland. It is the Democratic Party is as an institution. Everyone is terrified to try to hold people responsible for their fucking actions. I mean, I guess it makes sense because Democrats are always afraid of standing up for something in a strong way, but it's truly shocking the way that this has unfolded. Although, it really shouldn't have surprised me after, for example, Nancy Pelosi didn't try to get the House back as soon as she possibly could after the coup and was just like, oh, well, we're on recess. So I don't know why if this surprises me anymore, but it's still fucking shocking.
Yes, it makes you, it's almost the sort of thing that it wound up being like the stereotype of unions, right? Like, it's like, oh, we're on break. What, you just took a break and my house is still done. No, we got to go break. We'll come back. Don't work Tuesdays. What? Like what? It's like the money pit or something, right? And but yeah, it's just very concerning. Like, and my wife talked about how it's like, and then with Trump, right? So when you talk about our institutions and our norms, because Kellyanne Conway, Hatch Act violator, is out there writing books or whatever. There's no consequence, and so I think with someone like Trump and those people that sort of corrupt institutions, they would come. It's like, oh yeah, I think I'm gonna accept my renomination at the White House. That's great background. It's like, oh, well, actually, that violates the Hatch Act, it's public grounds. I think I'll also save money if I use my press secretary for my campaign or whatever. Well, that also, because it's public, that's, so that violates the Hatch Act. And he's like, and then, so?
Yeah.
And, like, unless there's accountability.
Like, you never actually, if you never get actually punished for anything, why do you care?
When there are no consequences, it's just enabling it. But for some reason, even even what's supposed to be the opposition party to that is terrified to take a strong stand. Oh, well, in America, we don't throw our political leaders in prison. Well, we should if they fucking try to overthrow the government.
Oh yeah, he committed multiple, and Andrew Gillum is.
Well, he sent Berlusconi to prison.
Well, Andrew Gillum,
which is exactly where he belonged.
Yeah, Andrew Gillum was indicted for something that obviously Trump has done. Like, you could obviously make that case. So there's still it's just he's too big to fail, which is just why you attract. It's like why an Al Capone would be like, oh, I could do all of this as president. All I need to do is get elected, and is all I can steal. Hooray! So it's a very concerning situation, and obviously, unless this is not leading to an indictment, and I go that looks bad, then it's just like, oh, he had a coup, and that the Department of Justice doesn't do anything. Trump and every Republican will obviously say he's obviously been exonerated. That's happened before. So as they've said, hold out hope that he will do something, and that's fine. Everyone's like, he knows better than us, because institutionalism, right? Like, how dare you don't know, you're not Merrick Garland, you don't know anything compared to him, type of stuff. So
we got so lucky that our fascists were so dumb the first time around. They're not the second time around. They've already improved their fucking game since then, not to mention gotten a fascist majority on the Supreme Court. I mean, we were so lucky. It really was. And there were several times when the only thing that saved us from some terrible fucking executive order was the fact that they were so incompetent that they did it procedurally wrong.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, also there was with Mike Pence and with others, it was really the idea of, oh, well, if I get, it's like the lion having some reasonable sense of, oh, if a human walks into my cage, I'd love to eat this human, but most likely I'll get shot. I've recognized this guy, and I have a comprehension of that. And if that doesn't happen, eventually the lion's going, okay, I'm just going to eat this guy, because apparently that guy's asleep. Maybe he's not even a real sniper. And so a lot of this was a clear sense of, well, yeah, if I try to overturn a presidential election, if I just vote, obviously there'll be repercussions. I'll lose donors. If none of that happens, well, of course I will not. So, if we don't win Pennsylvania, the governor's race, and this fascist who's running so desperately, hopefully that he will win. Unfortunately, Fetterman is running 9 points ahead of Oz, but Shapiro is only kind of tied, which is scary because if he loses, you have this guy, one, you're going to get an abortion ban.
Yeah.
And two, he's going to overturn. And what would happen is either women leave and then you want liberals leave Pennsylvania after the ban. If in 2 years, Trump or DeSantis would win outright, or he's going to just overturn anything on fraud, for any point. So it is scary. And why it's the vote now stuff is, or vote harder stuff is frustrating because it's not like I don't get you have to do the work or you have to do whatever. It's just, we're dealing with gangsters.
They're also trying to they want to electoral college the states so that they can not count votes from the city.
Oh, well, that is, the entire Texas GOP platform is an abortion.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was offensive to abortions. Yeah.
Well, that's what they want. I mean, it's that.
The other thing is anti-democracy.
And it's what we've seen in the past, what we've had in the past, so we sort of kind of rationalize it. But it's just very, and again, I go back to when you're obsessed with Susan Sarandon and Bernie Sanders and whatever, I think you miss. So I've seen a lot of folks, not just blue MAGAs, it's normal Democratic women who are really supporters and believe that, what they saw as very important for them was denied by Sanders and Trump, even though actually Clinton beat Sanders, as I recall it, but fine. But I've seen their things of this is Bernie Sanders' fault or the fault of everyone who didn't vote for Hillary and who stayed home. And you can do that message, you can do that meme, but what you're missing, this goes back to the top of the show, is that 2016 was the first election after John Roberts gutted the Voting Rights Act. So when you're now actually in your meme denigrating arguably victims, people disenfranchised by the Roberts, this currently, fascist court, you are now actually your vendetta, your rage is over what is, and it's obviously much more motivating to be, oh, you guys weren't able to vote because of this corrupt court. How can we make sure you get out there to vote again? We support you. This was terrible. Instead, it's like you guys were just wanting, ponies and your purities, and now this is where you're happy. And it's I don't see how that's at all compelling. I don't see how telling, having joking memes. Again, a lot of men have did this, as Robyn has said, joking memes about, oh, now you're in the Handmaid's Tale because you just weren't motivated enough to work, to vote for Hillary Clinton. It's like, well, that's kind of very cruel. Even a woman who actually voted for Trump, a Walmart employee.
This is the thing, I also want them to have reproductive rights.
She doesn't.
Yes, I take my moment of mental vindictiveness where I'm like, yeah, you're going to be wanting to have a baby, and oh, surprise, you don't have an obstetrics gynecologist anywhere. Oops, how are you going to get that done? It's going to cost you $16,000. But at the end of the day, I'm actually sad that we didn't get our ponies, because guess what? If we had our fucking ponies, AKA healthcare, subsidized education, and childcare, this would be slightly less terrifying for people. But as it is, people are going to be having to spend, it costs so much money to give birth in this country. On average, it's $13,000, with insurance, in Louisiana, which is a place I tend to focus because of how anti-abortion they are and how high their maternal mortality rate is. It's $16,000. The idea that anyone is paying that much to get pregnant, give birth is horrifying and heartbreaking to begin with, because most Americans cannot afford a $1,000 emergency. It might be 40% of Americans, something like that. But one of the reasons, I keep saying the doctors aren't going to move to these places. Part of the reason they stay in cities is because the rural areas don't pay them enough to pay off their student loans. which are like insane. Like they're like, I have $250,000 in student loans. I can't afford to go to East Bumfuck and start a family practice. Childcare, people who do end up keeping the children, you know, versus sending them into the foster care system, which a lot of people will choose to do because the foster care system is, you know, not perfect. Even like with adoption, you don't know who's getting your kid some of the time.
If I could just ask you, Robyn, because
yes.
you are not an actual Democratic politician, yet you were able to sum up why student loan relief, even for doctors who are rolling around in money and lighting cigars.
But they're not at first. They're actually really not.
Actually a positive. So I've seen a lot of supposed liberals embracing right-wing rhetoric that student loan relief is terrible and will be a same, you know, how dare you do that? And not, what about Black people? And I'm like, that's actually racist because Black people are in fact doctors, but and lawyers. And actually, they probably are most likely to not have rich parents. And they are also
we all benefit from things like people being doctors.
Yeah. So to your point, like to have drawn, you were able to like, it's also frustrating to me. You were able to very clearly articulate that here's how it benefits people in rural areas if even a doctor can afford to live there. Because if every doctor, every lawyer, this also goes to if you're a rural person who needs a public defender, if they can only pay off their loans or live if they go to a big firm in a big city. One of the reasons my wife wound up in New York, it's like, you know, you have to actually be at the top of at one of the top percent schools, at the top percent of that, and go there to make a living. That's not everyone. And so, you know, you need those doctors, you need those lawyers everywhere, and paying that off does benefit. And also, when I see very smart white moderates talk about how, well, I don't care about student loans, I care about racial justice. It's like, again, you know, someone in a poor Black area working as a public defender probably needs their loans paid off to afford to do this. Because otherwise, they're not going to move to that town. They're going to. So if you care about racial justice, you actually do care about this particular issue.
All of these things are connected. It's not like they're all, you know, these very separate things like, and this is my issue, and this is my issue. It's all of these things are connected. And the fact that we don't have so many of these things is going to make this all so much worse. Like,
and that's
like, it would be
when Alito wrote, and this was in the draft opinion too, like, oh, well, it's fine to force people to carry pregnancies to term against their will because some jobs offer health insurance. In some places, and in some places you can access pre-K. Like, seriously, that's what you're gonna fucking say?
Yeah.
First of all, like, you would strike down any of those things if we actually did enact them. Not to mention that you oppose them on partisan grounds, and go fuck yourself. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm going.
I mean, this court is like, and the fact that any defense of the court try to make the court more say, look, I don't support violence, but to me, what was left on the table and what Ron DeSantis would have done, what Ted Cruz did. Ted Cruz was riding with the trucker convoy, right? He was riding, you know. What he would prioritize would be, man, I don't support violence, but, you know, going back to, you know, ballot or the bullet, right? Unfortunately, if desperate people believe we have people serving for life. They're not the president. You know, when people tore down, oh my God, Biden's president, even if he had stolen it, we're talking about 4 years, right? And then you can get rid of him. And here, you know, Amy Coney Barrett serving for life. Kavanaugh, like another 30 years. And so you're saying that there is no way to, they're unaccountable and there's no way to really, and so to say the fact that people can.
It seems like at least Kavanaugh should be like the most able to be impeached because he lied about other shit before. Like he's already, he perjured himself in a variety of ways during his testimony.
How much he likes beer, though. I did believe that part.
Wait, what?
I do believe him about how much he likes beer.
Yeah, no, that was in fact believable.
Not to defend
I like gin.
Not to defend those guys. They are lawyers. and it's more of the Collins and Manchin were chumps, but they're lawyers and they're actually legally accurate questions, much like I did not have sexual relations with that woman type stuff. But with the issue with the questions about Roe was always like it's settled law, it's precedent, which is just like if I were to ask, like, are you gonna break into my house and steal all my stuff and kill my family? It's like, I believe there's a lock on your door. Oh, well, I'm a little okay. Could I just go, because a lock could be broken, and then you could come in and steal my stuff and kill my family and me, and I don't want that. So I just want to clarify that I can't speculate on hypothetical situations where I would come in and kill you and your family. All I can say is there's a lock on that door. I like locks. I believe highly in the concept of locks and doors. Here's the century. This person created the door. Oh, well, that's great. Oh, well, that's good enough for me. You're confirmed. I feel so safe now. And so it is obviously a scam. And I remember Chris Coons, one of the chief chumps, was talking afterward about, man, everyone was so racist and terrible to Ketanji Brown Jackson. I felt bad that I opposed Gorsuch on just his on his political beliefs. Maybe I'm the problem, because Chris Coons is just one of the more annoying centrists out there. And I was like, well, no, you're a chump because you should have opposed Gorsuch because he's a 50-year-old radical from the Federalist Society who was going to overturn Roe v. Wade. It is okay to do it just because it is. And
it's very different to oppose someone for their political views versus, I just don't think I like black ladies.
Or making up stuff about her. Like, I'm going to lie about your record, about every pedophile. If
I would make stuff up, then I could really, It's like, Stephen, I'm pretty sure you're a serial killer.
So how are you not a serial killer? And like that, the fact that you can't. So
tell me about your life as not being a serial killer.
I still think Ted Cruz isn't the Zodiac killer, but that's just me.
So that remains my concern.
Smart enough to be I'm sorry, Ted Cruz is not smart enough to be the Zodiac killer. If Ted Cruz came up with a cipher, I would be able to solve it. I'm really good at like cryptograms. But
that is my concern.
That's my proof.
We just have not an awareness of how dangerous these people are and what they're doing, and if we are not willing to engage them on those terms, it is not going to work. And like,
be fucking more dangerous than they are is really like where I'm at right now.
Yes. Well, Terry Canfield, one of the more annoying centrists on Twitter, has always been like, if we
I don't even know who that is.
If we do, democracy is hard and fight, and people like strongmen because they're easy, and we just if we were to ever indulge in
people
those,
like strong everyone. People don't like weak ass people. Sorry.
Well, as I've always said, it's like if McConnell's actions are illegal, then we should arrest him. If not illegal, we should perhaps learn from his example. And if we are not willing, if we're just going to be rolled over, then that is not the best method. We need to get vicious. There needs to be escalation. And so the fact that just everyone's going to come back to work and it will be normal again after what just happened. And everyone gets pulled into it, right? Like Sotomayor talking about how what a nice guy, Clarence Thomas is and how he just loves people. He fundamentally doesn't. And
he's just a teddy bear.
I thought it was like a hostage. She was just saying that to save a life. Like there was like because he's like one of the worst people who's existed. If you actually read the stuff he's even said willingly on quote how much he hates liberals, hates people. He's not like John Roberts. I've met him in passing. He's he presents as pleasant. Like no, Clarence Thomas is and his wife, they're really terrible people.
Yeah.
So I just hope that
aggressively so.
I just hope that the hostages that were released because Sotomayor said this publicly to great personal cost to herself and her soul are grateful for what she accomplished. It's like,
the unfortunate thing is that's not for, that is sadly for a group of Democrats who want to hear that. Like that's who that's for. It's not even for Republicans, I think, at this point. I think it's for Democrats who want to hear that and be like, oh, phew, she's, not too much.
Right. The same ones who, thought that the most important thing to do in the wake of the leaked draft opinion gutting bodily autonomy of women and pregnant people all over the country was, not to do anything about that, but rather to make sure that our oppressors have more security. Yeah. Because peaceful protesting on their block is just fucking terrifying.
By their own neighbors.
They walk around with cheese plates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're just more unaccountable. It was a way to sort of say we don't support violence, we'll correct them, but obviously we need to also discuss the fact that these are unaccountable, they're very frustrating people. But there's a challenge with identifying with the anger, with what people are feeling, and Republicans do feel that. And I think Ted Cruz is able to do that with the anti-vaxxers, and the all Republicans were able to do that with COVID protesters. Even when some of them tried to kidnap Whitmer, they were able to just say, obviously, I don't support that, but I still support the 90% of them. But where Democrats feel that just one random person threatening the life of it means that every is a problem and every protest is a problem. And it does feel as if in America, and I think it is because Republicans have support from a majority of white people, they can function as if this is their house. And Democrats are the functions. This is not our house. And we have to be very polite.
We are guests here.
And what we say and what we do. And if we can even use the bathroom, we got to be very careful. And obviously not a number 2, because that's embarrassing. So just be very, very polite in someone else's house. Just stop at a gas station later, but not here. And so that's kind of the mentality. And that just gives an advantage. That worked in a way when you're dealing with a different Republican Party. It doesn't deal with this latest variant. And that's the danger. So to wind things up on a positive note, and I'm going to make fun of someone in the comments who said that they had heard originally, because I referenced Bananarama in our things, and they thought it was Groove Summer, which, well, it's in the title. The title is Cruel Summer. It's right there. Like, I don't get how I still don't understand how someone really thought Jimi Hendrix was singing "Excuse Me While I Kiss This Guy," as if he's like, while I'm jamming, hold on, I need a moment.
I was very confused on La Isla Bonita. I'm just going to say.
Different language. Okay.
I thought it was like Last Night I Dreamt of Some Dago. Or Bagel. Is Bagel or Dago? I wasn't really sure.
I think my favorite of the misheard lyrics is someone creating a band based on a misheard lyric from Raspberry Beret, the Lightning Seeds. That is just not actually in the song. It's the Lightning Seeds. So that's embarrassing, because you've got all your materials on this, and everyone's gonna, well, actually, that's not the lyric. It's like, so, but it's also sound nice. It's a nice band, whatever. So I, in theory, will be away for another couple weeks. I'm traveling, and you just don't know what's gonna happen. Like, I don't know.
He's the wanderer. Yeah, the wanderer.
Until I'm physically in the air, I will feel like okay. But now planes, it's like I'm just gonna check. I'm sure my flight's been canceled already. I'm gonna go check, or it'll be hardly. But otherwise, I will be on vacation the next couple of weeks. So, and tuned off.
We're gonna cry the whole time.
Oh, thank you. I was actually away.
Alone.
I was out of town my wife had an event in California, and we were away, and our flight had been canceled. So we wound up having to drive up to San Francisco. We were in San Francisco and having a very pleasant day. My son was watching the sea lions. It was great. And then I got the notification about the draft leak. And then so it's sort of been barriered by horrible news.
Yeah. One of my best friends was visiting me here in Wisconsin from West Virginia this past week. And we had a great, lovely trip. And like, I saw the Miranda decision, and I was like, I'm not going to read it yet. Like, I'm going to wait and hold my morning in a little bit. And then like, I woke up Friday morning and was like, son of a bitch.
Set everything on fire.
And you know what, like when you were talking about not wanting to like be in a place like this anymore, you're right. I went to Wisconsin Friday, or I went to Chicago Friday, because I was like, at least for now, I still have rights in Chicago. I'll go with my friends. For now.
Well, so I guess we have to convince, I think should be every dude in your mentions who blames Bernie Sanders should essentially volunteer. Should be sort of a legal. You put a legal.
I don't want to listen to you about that. I think that's what bothers me. They're like, but you just have to listen to my personal pain and anguish about this particular subject, or else like the world will cave in. I'm like, really? Women are losing their reproductive rights. I get that you hate this one random old dude, but like,
you should have Jamie draft a contract that you put in the top of your bio. And we know that no man will read it because men don't listen, you know.
Oh my God.
Listen.
Oh my God. I just realized my OnlyFans shit.
When they respond, if they mention, you say that in the draft, if you are a man who wants to blame what has happened on Bernie Sanders, you are volunteering to move to these red states and help build up the Democratic population so that everyone can have rights, and that is non-negotiable. And as soon as they
no. Here's my idea. I will charge $150 an hour, or whatever, however we work this out, a session where like men can tell me about how mad they are about Bernie Sanders and whoever else and progressives in general, and then I will donate that money to abortion funds. And that's how I'll get that done, because apparently they just really need to tell me this information.
You have a very good voice for that sort of, was it an ASP or whatever thing? That's sort of, so that could be it. It's just
are you saying like ASMR?
Yeah, exactly. So
your voice is so loud. I would never be.
Just be able to, well, David's like, yeah, that's right. You're right.
Sorry,
you got me.
On my phone.
That's right. You got me. This is all Bernie Sanders' fault and Susan Sarandon.
I know.
You're so right.
Like, oh my God, you're such a brilliant man.
I never thought about it. Always on camera.
I never thought of it that way.
Phrased it that way. You're the first person to phrase it that way. I want to be Lauren Underwood. I actually am Lauren Underwood, and you are awesome for pointing this out. I don't need reproductive rights.
If you yell hard enough about 2016, then magically we get our abortion rights back. That's how
I know, it's magic.
It'll never happen. We will run again. Just saying that people are racist and sexist, and that's why they don't like Kamala Harris, will magically help her win the Rust Belt and those states. And it's guaranteed. It's just guaranteed, because it's not really that important. It's not like this is important. Democracy's on the ballot, so it's really important. So maybe just being vice president is good enough, because I just don't want to die. Like if Tim Ryan win, I would vote for him, or that Buttigieg. They want a white guy, go with the white. I just don't.
The saltines. I'm sure I wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yes, go ahead. Like just run. Whoever can win and not remove my rights. And it's not DeSantis. It's like, well, no, it has to be this way. Similar with like the whole stuff of buying off. Like, okay, well, if you really think young people, well, if that's enough, then like just buy off young people, or that's what Republicans do. Just do whatever it takes. No, we need to be able to hector you and say, this is why you should vote for us. And that's the only reason. And that's how politics work. And we are very good at it. So with that, we're at time. It's always great having you here, me.
It's good to see you.
I hope that you or Robyn will be able to continue.
Jake's going to do it with me the next couple of weeks, so it'll be fun.
All right.
We'll be yelling about girly things.
Yeah.
Probably.
I'll bring my copy of Girl Talk Secret Diary.
You'll actually you'll just talk about sports and cars. Now that Steven's gone, we'll talk about sports and cars and
all the macho things like musical theater.
Exactly. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.